We explored who consensus is too low on in the 2026 NFL Draft. And today, we explore the other side of the coin.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, typically joined by Joe Marino. Not joined by Joe Marino here today on the program, but want to give a special welcome and shout out to all of our everydayers, those of you who are tuning in here as we look at fading consensus in the 2026 NFL Draft. I've done about 220-ish final grades, and I pulled up the consensus rankings that are available across the internet, and they pull big board rankings from all different kinds of resources. And our objective today is to look at some consensus players that maybe I just have some questions with, right? And players that I don't necessarily dislike, some of which will not be for me, full disclosure. But some other ones who maybe I just see and recognize what they do well, but maybe the valuation versus the evaluation of the traits gave me a different conclusion, if you will. So that's our objective here on this episode of Locked On NFL Scouting. Joe Marino is off all week. He's on vacation. I am recording this evening with a very special guest for some additional shows this week, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But first, we're going to tackle fading consensus. And I'm using Mock Draft Database, which ranks 133, this is according to their site, updated today at 2:07 a.m., presumably Eastern Standard Time. 133 big boards, plus over 1,000 mock drafts. And the first name I have comes in at number 3, David Bailey, who I like. I like David Bailey quite a bit. He is my 18th ranked player in this class. So I think he's a top 20 player in the class. All of the talk about Dallas potentially moving up and making the big splash and potentially getting up into the top 5 to go get David Bailey. And I think the conversation around Bailey's game for me has jumped the shark a little bit, where I'm not going to doubt that he's going to be an impactful pass rusher in the NFL. I think he very much has the motor, the explosiveness. He could speed rush off the edge and play from wide angles and be a very overwhelming player to play against with the speed that he has. But if I'm going to put a guy in the top 5, I'd probably like a little bit more of a complete profile where he's a leaner body type. I don't think he's exceptionally effective against the run. And again, I like David Bailey. He's a top 20 player for me. Predictively speaking, you put a positional value lens on him, and I'd be totally fine if I was a team in the back half of the top 10 drafting David Bailey. But top 3 and potentially as a top 3 player in the class and potentially trading multiple first-round picks to go up and get a David Bailey, that for me is probably just a bridge too far versus the consensus of a consensus ranking of number 3. I don't think he plays with a great deal of control at the line of scrimmage when he has to be a little bit more calculated and read blocks and then disengage off of blocks. I think he's got enough to build off of with his pass rush stuff, but I don't think he's the best power player. I think there are times where if he tries to take you down the middle and he doesn't really explode through first contact, or if you have a really strong core and your body posture is good, you can kind of sit him down a little bit. So I think he's going to have to continue to build that out. Now, if you're talking about how well he can build off of what he has, I think the world is his oyster, right? But for me, I do just see enough cracks in who he is as a player right now to say this would not be a player for me that I would be selling the farm to go up and put my entire draft class on, especially in a draft class where I see a lot of appealing pass rushers. Monroe Freeling is the next one for me. And part of this for Freeling just comes down to the sample size of reps, right? He's relatively green as a player. I'm pulling up his actual snap share. He's got 1,600 snaps At Georgia, 881 of them came this past year at left tackle. He kind of split the year before that when he played 600 snaps between left and right tackle. I like that there's some cross training here. Freeling for me is another player I like. He's my 24th ranked player in the class. I have a late 1/early 2 on Monroe Freeling, but the mock draft database has Freeling as the 11th rated player in the class. And you see some mock drafts that have him going 6th to the Browns. And I understand if you're shopping for a left tackle, maybe Francis Mauigoa or maybe Spencer Fano are a little bit too uncertain as far as transitioning them full-time to the left-hand side. And I get that. And I do think Fano, I've warmed up a lot on Spencer Fano as a player because I see for some schemes, he'd probably be better suited as an interior player. Now, I think he can play tackle in the NFL, but I don't think he's a scheme transcendent player that you could put at tackle in any scheme and system and get impact play as a top 12 player in the class. And for Freeling, it's the stuff that for me, I think is just a little more rough around the edges. And, it's not like he's woefully under-repped, but obviously was a bit of a late bloomer. He's 21. I see kind of body control. And you saw that at the combine, I thought, with the on-field workout stuff, where maybe just kind of the lateral agility and cleanliness with how he redirects. I think he can be a little unpolished with the way in which when he has to slide or keep his feet active. Now, when he first gets out of the stance and he first sets his frame, it looks awesome, right? And he's got that gravitational pull as a player. I don't think that you can question that. But he's a player who at times, obviously at 6'7", plays a little high. So you've got a high center of mass, a high center of gravity. And I think that there's a refinement of that probably needs to happen for Freeling. So for me to pull up mock draft database and see that he's ranked 11th as a guy who's 24th on my board, I obviously like this player. I'm just a little bit lower than the consensus on as a player. I'm going to get to one more player before the break, and then we get a bunch of guys after the break. Keldric Faulk. And this is, again, I know this is one of the more polarizing players in the class. And understandably so. He's kind of this Rorschach test of what do you see? You pull up the profile, 6'5 3/4, 276 pounds. I've got a firm second round grade on Keldric Faulk. He's my 50th ranked player. I don't dislike Keldric Faulk. I like Keldric Faulk for what I think he can be, but mock draft database has Keldric Faulk ranked at 20th, right? And for me, where I think I feel most comfortable with Keldric Faulk is probably a position transfer. I think he's a linear athlete who I think would really shine as being this hybrid 4-eye, which is inside shade of offensive tackle, 5 technique, and maybe a penetration style B-gap defender who lines up head up over tackles and in, as compared to being somebody, if you're going to bank on him being a true edge, especially in today's day and age where a lot of your front multiplicity requires you to maybe line up at a wide 9 and then maybe line up at a 6 or 7 and then line up at a 5. And I think he's a tackles and in kind of player. Some of the names that I've invoked for kind of my inspired outcomes for Keldric Faulk are Eric Armstead, DeForest Buckner. I think he's got that kind of frame at 6'5 7/8, 276, 34 3/8 inches on the arms. Ran a 4.67. That's plenty of juice, but I think he's best when you can let all of that power that's rolled into his frame, and he's still got so much room to grow. Yes, he's going to destroy tight ends, and he's going to win the edge in the run game right now as built if you play him out there. But I think if you're going to get a player that makes splash and impact plays, the power can be so overwhelming that if you lean into his build and you lean into bulking him up, I think you'll get a much more prolific player. Now, guaranteeing you're going to get that from everybody is nil, right? You have to have a good player development program to guarantee you that. And because of that, I see him as a high variance player and as somebody who scouts on the outside looking in. These are all risk assessments, right? I think that talking point comes up every single year. These are all risk assessments. And from a pass rush standpoint, I think it's a lot easier to project him, putting him head up and inside of tackles and not asking him to play outside in as a pass rusher and instead say, hey, you got a really explosive first step. Let's put another 15, 20 pounds on you, and let's have you playing forward and shooting the gaps into the B gap and getting upfield in a hurry where you don't have to take these steep angles and you can't get carved off with somebody who plays you inside out and says, okay, we're going to task your second and third pass rush counters to win you back into the pocket. Or you're going to have to play really hard, and on extended plays, that's where you get your chase downs. He's a raw power player for me. So consensus has him somewhere in the top 20. He's 50th for me. So he's not for me, but depending on what kind of scheme you run, the fit might not be for me if I was going to pick the best situation for him. We got a whole bunch more to get to here on Locked On NFL Scouting as we are fading consensus here on today's show. Make sure you guys stick with us. Today's episode of Locked On NFL Scouting is sponsored by BetterHelp. Financial stress is something a lot of people are carrying right now. And it's not just about the numbers. It can affect your sleep, your relationships, your overall mental health in ways that build up over time. And the reality is struggling with money doesn't mean that you failed anything. Sometimes it just means you haven't had the right kind of support to deal with what you're thinking and feeling and working your way through. It's something that I've thought about, how easy it is to put pressure on yourself financially without really talking about it, right? The stress that comes with trying to provide for you and your family and your loved ones, and the expectations that you feel to have everything together and not wanting to burden those people by talking about what you're feeling and the uncertainty that comes with it. Therapy isn't about financial advice. It's about working through the stress, the anxiety, and the emotions that come with it. With over 30,000 licensed therapists and more than 6 million people served, BetterHelp makes it easier to get matched and start focusing on what you need. When life feels overwhelming, therapy can help. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Do also want to use this opportunity to throw the invitation out for you guys to check out the Everydayer Club, where you get ad-free episodes of the program, and you can join the Locked On NFL Community Discord and join and chat with other listeners of the show. You can find the join link in the show description below. We are fading consensus here, and I literally just have the mock draft database consensus big board up, and then I've got my own personal rankings next to it. The next one that I have is a player that I struggle with. I won't say a lot. I get why there's appeal for Caleb Lomu, the left tackle from Utah. Man, like 6'6" and a quarter, 313. He's got tackle length. He's only 21. But I really struggled with what I felt was kind of like a lack of physicality. I thought there was way too many times where we're not getting to the plus side of the line of scrimmage. We're not creating displacement. I thought he got smoked against Texas Tech on way too many occasions. I didn't see a lot of like reactive instinct in his game either. Now, I thought he sorted in pass protection well. I think he's got good movement skills. I just didn't see a lot of, whether it was with his anchor, with his base blocking ability, with his punch power. I just didn't see a lot of physicality in his game. And I was really surprised because, we were watching both Fano and Lomu at the same time. I had to pause and I had to say, I'm just going to watch one, and then I'll go back and watch some players, and then I'll come back and I'll watch the other one. Like for me personally, because they are two guys that are very dynamic athletes. And I had these things that I'm seeing on tape that I say, okay, like I'm not really enamored with the physical elements of Lomu's game. And then he's also getting watered down by how good of an athlete Spencer Fano is. So it was really a struggle for me at first. And he's a great athlete, right? Like Lomu ran sub 5 seconds on the 40-yard dash. He had a 1.74 10-yard split. He was 32 and a half in the vert as a 6'2 athlete that came in at 313. Like, he wasn't a bad athlete, but neither one of those guys is to me an overwhelming power player. And then Lomu, I thought, was missing more of it while also being the lesser athlete. And it gave me a hard time where Lomu, from a consensus standpoint, is somewhere between 20th and 25th, depending on where you look. Mock Draft Database consensus board has him 24th overall. I've got an early 3 on Lomu. And if he reaches his potential, yes, he will absolutely outperform where I have him graded. This is probably the first guy on the Mock Draft Database, like, consensus board, that I can look at and say, like, he's probably just not for me, especially relative to some of the other tackles that exist in the class. Now, what is hard about that is the vast majority of the other tackles in this class are right tackles. Let me pull it up. Maui Noah, right tackle. He's my OT1, right? And then Spencer Fano would be 2. I have him slightly graded higher as an interior player when I grade him universally across all schemes, but he would be OT2. And then I have Monroe Freeling, who can do both, but is a left tackle this past year. Caden Proctor, okay. But then it goes Blake Miller, right tackle. Max Ihanachor from Arizona State, right tackle. And then Caleb Lomu with a 3rd round grade. And, like, once you get into that area of the draft, are we really expecting Demetrius Crownover to be a plug-and-play starter? Do we think Travis Burke from Michigan's going to be, or from Memphis, is going to be a plug-and-play starter? I like Jude Bowdry from BC as, like, an early day 3 guy, but I can't definitively say, yeah, he's going to be a starter. Austin Barber, like, you've just entered into a different stratosphere, and Lomu feels like the standalone guy between, for me, what the first and second tier of tackles are, and then, like, the guys that I think make a lot of sense end of day 1 or end of day 2, end of top 100, early day 3, swings of the bat. And that's just how I interpret him. And I know that that's not a consensus opinion, because that's the whole point of this show, right? Is to fade consensus and just what I struggled with, what I didn't see. Let's see who else we got here. Lomu was at 24 on the consensus rankings. Ty Simpson, yeah, I'll put him in here. Consensus rankings have him 31st. He's 55 for me on my rankings. Now, I do have a 2 on him. I see the appeal. It's just he's such a high variance outcome player, right? The 1-year starting experience, doesn't have big time tools. Thought he really got frazzled throughout the course of the season when he didn't have it right at the line of scrimmage. Now, you see the processing, and you see, like, there's enough outside of structure stuff where I think he cannot be a liability in that regard. But the deep passing was a really big concern. There's some kind of woof misses on tape. I wouldn't say he's not for me, but where he's going to get drafted, even if he doesn't go in the first round, like, if he goes in the top 40, if he goes to the Cardinals or the Jets the 3rd time around, or somebody else in that window, that's not for me. And that's just, for me, it's the risk versus the reward, with what I think the reward and the ceiling is as a player. Let's see here. What about Cassius Howell? Is he really still that high on consensus rankings? Cassius Howell, consensus, yeah, 30, 34, 35 on the consensus rankings. We are talking never before seen levels of lack of length. And I get Ruben Bain exists, and he's another guy that had poor measurements, right? But Cassius Howell, 23-year-old rookie with 0th percentile for arm length and reach, and the wingspan is not 0th percentile, but it's not much better. I thought the ability to get off of blocks, the ability to defend the run, in a lot of capacities left me wanting more. I don't think he has a great ability to play up and through guys and reduce angles. Now, he's a phenomenal Lamborghini speed rushing off the edge. And that to me is your kind of a DPR, as a designated pass rusher. How early do you draft that? Right? If he's going to play 350 snaps a year and say you get 300 of them right in their pass rush opportunities, it's the other extreme for me of like the nose tackle debate on how early do you draft nose tackles when they're going to play 45% of the snaps for you. Howell for me is just not, I can't get there. And I recognize how explosive he is as a speed rusher off the edge. And man, he's got a great demeanor. And I love the attitude that he plays with. And you see him and he's talking smack because he's smoking guys on the other side of the ball. I like a really fun player and some very highly redeemable pass rush skills. I just see such a narrow scope for what success looks like for Howell as a player that it had me lower. So let me make sure I give you my finalized grade here for Cassius Howell from Texas A&M. Yeah, I'm 68th on my board. I have a 3rd round grade. So older player, lack of length, no run appeal for me as a somebody that like I wouldn't feel really good about being out there on 3rd and 3 or 1st and 10 against 12 personnel. Like I'd have a hard time with it. So he's firmly a midday 2 guy for me, and he's like top 35 on the consensus rankings. Probably not for me when it's all said and done. I would take my chances elsewhere. We got more guys to get to as we fade consensus here on Locked On NFL Scouting. Make sure you guys stick with us. Working our way through, and we're into the 40s on the consensus rankings for the mock draft database. Lee Hunter's a name for me that not as a mid-second round guy. And Lee Hunter, man, I really loved his personality at the combine. He had a big-time personality. He was somebody who had kind of that spark plug energy about him with a big smile on his face. Obviously had the big splash this year, but he had big splashes this year playing on a defensive line that had David Bailey, who I have some questions about, but I certainly don't have the ability to question his ability to rush the passer, and Romello Height, who's a very like physically mature older player, got one of the best pass rush bags in the class. And I think it really set Lee Hunter up for a lot of opportunities to kind of create havoc, where when I watched Lee Hunter on tape, I thought he was a little bit more top heavy. And I don't want to say slow burn, but like, I didn't think he had like a big, you're talking about guys that are interior players that come in and warrant like top 50 conversation. He's top 50 on the consensus rankings. I didn't see the range. I didn't see kind of the anchor. I thought he was kind of top heavy and had like a hard time like sitting down on his hips with consistency against combo blocks and was kind of getting rooted a half a gap out. I don't think he's as twitchy as what he needs to be to really thrive in that kind of environment. So for me, he was more of like even front one tech who can get upfield and play through lateral contact and kind of help push the pocket or help create some havoc in the middle. But like to be able to flatten and get down the line of scrimmage and make plays, like I don't really see that. And then you throw on top of that, he's almost 24. Right. So Lee Hunter's another name for me. Keeping it a defensive tackle, Peter Woods. How did I skip Peter Woods? Oh yeah, he was 25th because he was right underneath Caleb Lomu. This is another one of those outlier guys for me that I've got a hard time with kind of the way that he played. And I thought where he was really good in 24 on tape, Peter Woods, was I thought he really showed some good flashes with like the point of attack stuff and the deconstructing of block stuff. but I thought he played high a little too often. I think he would get his eyes up and kind of lose his pad level. And then he kind of gets stuck on blocks and kind of get twisted out. He's still top 25 on the consensus rankings. And so he's a more of a deconstruction type player for me. Like, he didn't have good agilities. He didn't have good jumps. He had a good 10-yard split, but he didn't run a 40. But he did that at like sub 300 pounds. And now you don't have length on top of it, right? Where we're 31 and a quarters on the arms. So I think your best stuff comes from winning with your hands, but you're a close quarter combat player with how you play with your hands. And then there's some pad level consistencies. And then I thought we regressed in 24 to 25. Just an odd, like, if I'm trying to project where do I like him best? Is it really as a 3 technique? Do I think he's disruptive enough as a pass rusher to really prosper in that regard? I think he's far too erratic with how quickly he gets into some of his hands, as far as not setting my hands square on your chest and then trying to like shuck you off and uncover in a gap. Now, the physical ability, I think, is enough, but to warrant where he's being talked about as a top 20, top 25 player would not be for me. I think it's probably the safest way to describe how I feel about Peter Woods. And again, I see some pathways for success here. I just don't think you're at a very healthy intersection of where I think his probabilities come to reach those pathways versus how many teams can give it to him. Last name I have is Dani Dennis-Sutton, who is a fringe top. He's 69th on the mock draft database consensus. Depending on where you look, he might be a little higher, like 70. Yeah, he's top 75 player. Man, the testing's awesome, isn't it? 6'5" and 5/8, 256, 33 3/4 on the arms, 82 1/4 on the wingspan, ran a 4.63 with a 39.5-inch vert, and 10 feet, 11-inch broad jump, like way explosive. And I get like the pass rush measures are like the production profile is respectable, right? I just didn't see a very instinctive player. I thought a lot of his best disruption stuff came unblocked from wide angles and just using his athleticism to get more quickly than you probably anticipate into the mesh point or into the backfield or into the pocket. There's some run action coming at him and somebody arc releases and goes away and the tackle blocks down. And it's just, it's late to feel it. So he's somebody who it's kind of like Drew Aller is at the quarterback position, where you see all these very obvious and evident traits. But as I watch him play, it's like, man, like there's something's not connecting the way that it should. You're far too physically gifted to feel as erratic at times as what I felt Dennis-Sutton was on tape. Now, where do I have Dani Dennis-Sutton? I have Dani Dennis-Sutton ranked 119. So I have a 4th round grade on, like, because there is a point where the tools and the potential becomes undeniable. Is like, yeah, you should take this chance and hope that you can help them to feel things a little faster and have a wider cone of vision of what's happening and anticipate, kind of what an opposing team's trying to do. And maybe I'm misinterpreting it, right? Like, I don't want to get on here and act like I'm on my soapbox saying I'm smarter than everybody else. Like, that's not a fair accurate representation of like how I am approaching the evaluation process. And consensus is typically consensus because folks don't get out in front and bat ahead of consensus with great consistency on a year-over-year basis, right? So there's not necessarily like, this isn't from a place of ego that I know better, but it's things that I had a hard time with. So maybe from Dani Dennis-Sutton's standpoint, it's something that he's talked about with his coaches that they wanted him to occupy a certain space. So they wanted him to look out for this based off something else that happened on tape. And that's why in the games that I watch, he didn't respond in which the way I felt you would have responded when you got a certain stimulus. I don't know, because I'm not in the coaching room with him. But that's for me, kind of as I'm going through my risk assessments on these players, there's disconnects and risks versus rewards and best and worst case outcomes that for me just kind of painted some tough pictures for a lot of these guys. And there was a number of defensive linemen that were on this list with Lee Hunter and Cash Howell and Dani Dennis-Sutton and David Bailey, who again I like. Please don't comment and say, why do you hate David Bailey? He's just the 18th on my board. But it certainly is a really interesting group as a whole this year, this class. And I think you're going to see a lot of variance from the consensus because each one of these teams and their criteria is, I think it'll open the door for a lot more like beauties in the eye of the beholder. That's going to do it for us here on Locked On NFL Scouting. Another day in the books, Tuesday, April 7th. Appreciate you guys, as always, for checking out the show. As I've teased, I have a recording scheduled for this evening with a very special guest. Look forward to getting into all that with you again tomorrow. So make sure you hit subscribe, come back and see us. Kyle Krabs, that's it for me here. I'll talk to you all again soon.